Well, I decided I wanted another crazy knitting challenge like the 3 hour sweater, but I wanted to do something that was going to be a little more extreme, a little crazier, and I decided to let an AI, artificial intelligence, write a knitting pattern for me. If you want to find out if it actually worked out, keep watching. Hello, and welcome to Killer Kitsch Lizzie, my weird little world where I like to knit and sew, do other crafty things, and let an AI write knitting patterns for me. Why? Why have I done this? Because number one, intrigued about whether or not it could actually write a usable knitting pattern. And but the thing that sort of led me down the road to this was Engineering Knits has done a couple of mystery knitting pattern challenges where a friend will send her a knitting pattern, but there's no illustration, there's no title to what the pattern is, and I think some of the details that would give away what is being knitted are removed. So it was gonna be kind of hard for me to do this because I do have friends that knit, um, but I wanted sort of like something that, in the end, if it is wearable, if it turns out, something I want to wear. Not everyone has the same style as me. So not a lot of people. I mean, I have a few friends that knit vintage, but more friends knit modern. Um, and yeah, I mean, the friends that knit the vintage, I could have like easily said, "Hey, can you do this for me?" But everyone's, lives are busy and stuff. So I just wanted to figure out a way how to do it without having to bother anyone, and with all the AI stuff happening, um, and also my husband uses a lot of AI in his job as a web developer and accessibility expert. So I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to see what would happen if an AI program like Chat GPT wrote an actual pattern for me? And so what I did was, using an AI program, what I did use was Chat GPT. What I did was I asked it to, create an ink pattern for me. I did give it minor criteria. Um, my brother-in-law, who also uses AI in his job, uh, at this point is becoming an expert on how to speak to it or write information to it to get it to program the way he needs it to. And he said you have to give it, you can't just say create me a women's knitting pattern. You have to give it a little bit of criteria to work from. So I decided I wanted to see. I wasn't just gonna like pick one, just do one knitting pattern. I actually gave it 3 different sets of criteria to see what it came back with, and the criteria I gave it. I'm just gonna read out what I gave. Um, so for one, I said, and this is all I asked. I did not ask any more than this. I could have given very, very specific very, very specific details to it, but I wanted to see what would happen with like just the bare minimum. So, vintage style women's sweater with multiple bust sizes. The second one, a woman's sweater with multiple bust sizes, and a short sleeve sweater with multiple bust sizes. And the reason I did different sleeves and different, just women's versus vintage is because um, there's a lot of difference between, a lot of similarities too, but between a vintage pattern from the 1930s versus modern patterns today. There's a lot of techniques that aren't being used anymore, or there are new techniques that have been created over the decades. People's bodies have changed. Yarns have changed. There is way more acrylic yarn out there than there is wool. I mean, there is still a lot of wool. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that today, in today's technology, we're able to create acrylic yarns that are soft, that look and feel like wool. They're anti-pilling, and that helps out people who are like myself, who are allergic to wool, right? So, because I can't knit with wool, I only can knit with acrylics or cotton or bamboo or things like that. And I gotta tell you, yarn has come a long way from when I was a kid and knitting with acrylics. So I gave it, that information to work from. So back to this. So what I did was I didn't want, like, I really wanted this to be a mystery challenge. I have not read any of what got spit out by the AI. So what I did was typed in, hit enter, let it spit it out, did a select all, copy, paste it into a document, and then printed it off. I did it with all 3 of these patterns because I do not want to know what I'm in for because what I'm going to do as I'm doing the knitting pattern is I'm going to look at what I need. I'm going to look at what the gauge is, the needles, go and grab them, and then I'm going to go line by line. I know there's going to be sections where you're just like knit for 15 inches or whatever. That's fine. But I'm going to go line by line until the end of till the garment's done. I could be in for a huge surprise. It could be absolute crap. Or it could actually be a really usable pattern. It's sort of another reason I was thinking about trying this out is, and maybe people are already doing this, it is absolutely possible that pattern creators for big companies are already using this. It could be that independent pattern creators are also using it to assist them, because I think in a lot of cases you could do a base of a pattern, in my head anyways. I don't know if this is how it's going to work, because I don't know what it gave me, but use the AI to help you build a base, and then you work it out from there. You flush it out from there. Especially if you are trying to be size inclusive. I think in situations like that, it might be a good tool for you. I know a lot of people are leery of AI or hating on it right now. And there's a lot of good reasons for that, because it is doing some weird things. People are using it for not cool things, but also it is a helpful tool for other things, like an extremely helpful tool. And I want to see if this is actually going to be a helpful tool, or if it's just going to be just a fun experiment too, which I'm all about the fun experiments. So anyways, what I did is I said I've printed them all off. I have 3 pieces of paper that I have folded up and turn it without dumping everything out. Hopefully you can see that. There are... don't fall down. Don't fall down. Everything's falling over. 1, 2, 3 pieces of paper. And again, this is a vintage style woman's sweater, and a short sleeve sweater. Yeah. So I'm putting them in the hat. I am, as you can see, I'm moving them around. Hopefully nothing falls on the floor. Okay. I'm gonna pick one. I picked pattern. Also, what I'm going to do is at the end of this, actually I'm going to just put you over there. You don't fall over. At the end of this, what I'm going to do is whatever this pattern is, as is, I am going to put a PDF over on the Patreon post that I always create to accompany all of my videos for free. Okay, let's open it up. Oh, also I have a variety of yarn over here. I have DK, a light worsted, and sort of a medium worsted, and a heavier worsted. Because I don't, oh, and I have fingering weight yarn. I don't know if it's enough though. Worst case scenario, if this ends up being fingering weight, what I'll do is I will, I might end up having to do a striped sweater because I have a lot of fingering weight. It's the yarn I have is discontinued. I don't know why. Because it's an amazing, and it was popular, and the company's gone, that's why. But I have a lot of it, but in different colors. So if this ends up being fingering weight, because also I don't want to buy yarn, I would rather use up my stash for this. So if this turns out to be fingering weight, then I'm going to use up what I have, and I will have to do, like, it'll be a striped whatever. Okay. The moment of truth. Well, I guess the moment of truth is when I finish the garment, but opening it up. Okay. Vintage style women's sweater pattern, and it has put actually I'll do a photo of this. I'll put it up. Size is 32-inch bust all the way up to 56. 32, 34, 36, 38, 40. Okay. Worsted weight yarn. It says approximately 1,000 to 1,600 yards, depending on size. I guess garment size. US 8, 5mm for the body. US 7, 4.5mm needles for the ribbing. Oh, I do have my interchangeable needles here. Gauge. 18 stitches in 24 rows equals 4 inches in stockinette in the 5. Oh. Okay, my interchangeable 5 is on another garment. I do have another size 5 somewhere. I'll have to dig it out. Okay, so I'm going to have to choose my bust size. You know what I'm going to do? Because I'm going line by line, I'm still going to have to, like, what I do with regular knitting patterns is I highlight my size, so I make sure that I don't mess up. Like, and, accidentally do another size. So I'm going to get a highlighter out. I'm going to get a pen out and tick off every row as I go. So I'm going to do that. So the first thing I'm going to do, where am I? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do the gauge. I'm not even looking at how much I need to cast on yet. I'm going to do the gauge. So just trying to figure out, that feels like it's 18 stitches to 4 inches, like a light worsted. That feels like a white worsted to me. I just did some quick math in my head, so I'm gonna attempt. This is a light worsted. It's a Lion Brand yarn. Where's the gauge on here? Problem is the gauge on here for them is a 6mm needle. So that's 14 stitches to 18 rows. And on a 5mm, 18 stitches to 24 rows. That feels about right. So let me just, let me do a gauge swatch and I'll be right back. Anyway, so this is supposed to be 18 stitches, 24 rows, 4 inches, 4-inch square. Yep. And hold the edge. Perfect. Okay, so the light worsted is perfect. So just a couple of tips on gauge swatch. If you're using acrylic yarn, you don't have to block. As a matter of fact, you don't even benefit from blocking with an acrylic yarn. I've tested it out just because I was like, let me just see what happens. Nothing happens. However, if you're using wool, you have to block your gauge swatch, and I highly recommend that you block your gauge swatch if you're using wool to make sure you see how much stretch there's going to be. But because I'm using acrylic, I don't have to do that. Also, this is controversial. I don't keep my gauge swatches because in a lot of cases, and again, I'm trying to use up yarn. I don't want to have to buy more. I try to buy the right amount of yarn that I need for a project. There's always going to be yarn left over, unfortunately, because there's always yarn left over. So I actually unravel and reuse. Now that my gauge came out exactly perfect, I'm going to go ahead and change my needles to the 4mm. And I'm going to top up my coffee. And then when I come back, we will do the very first line of instructions for the sweater. Okay, so I have put the 4.5mm needles on. That is also US 7. What I'll do is in this part of the pattern, I will update with other knitting needle sizes, UK as well as the Japanese ones. I know a lot of people in the UK also knit with millimeters, but I'll add all the extra information there just so that everybody knows what needles to use at least. Yeah, so, oh yeah, I didn't list off the materials, or not all of it, I don't think. So, worsted weight yarn, and I've determined light worsted. Now, your light worsted might be different from mine, so again, do the gauge, the gauge swatch. US 8 5mm needles for the body, US 7 4.5mm needles for the ribbing, stitch markers, which I have, and a tapestry needle, which is in my little knitting kit. Okay, so let's go to the first line. Just put these needles down. And I should actually put a paper so I'm not, well, I'm just going to make sure I don't read ahead. Oh, first I have to figure out my size. So I'm going to highlight my size, which is, I'm going to do, I'm a 42 bust, so I'm going to highlight 42. But I'll do it row by row. I'm not going to go ahead and do it like on the other lines. Each line I'm going to highlight my size. So it's 5 over. Okay, so it says cast on 100 stitches with 4.5mm needles. I'm not going to make you sit here and watch me cast on. So I will either fast forward through it, or I will cut to the next thing. Actually, I might just speed it up and just fast forward through the cast on part, just so you don't have to sit here for 5 minutes. Well, it's not going to take me 5 minutes, and then once you've cast on, the next step is going to be work in knit 2, purl 2 ribbing for 2 inches. So let's cast on, and I'm personally, now casting on method, use whatever you want. Oh geez, now I just made a mess. Casting on, use whatever method you want. I'm going to be doing a long tail cast on That is generally what I do unless the instructions say otherwise. I just find that with any kind of garment that has ribbing, it allows the garment to stretch, but it also helps hold the shape. And if you don't know what long tail cast on is, I will link. I did a very long tutorial. Not a very long tutorial. I did a tutorial. It is a long video. You don't have to watch the entire video. Oh, but then I did a second video with just the stitches. So I'll link to both. Okay, so I have now done the 2-inch rib. Well, last few stitches. Also, I don't think I said at the beginning that this was the front. This is the front of the sweater, so I apologize. Okay, so I have now knit 2 inches of rib, and I just want to give 2 measurements. Just so again, I did a 42 bust, and there's not a massive difference between the needles for the rib and the needles for the body. So unstretched, the waist of this is 15.5. So unstretched, this would fit, a total. I mean, I don't know how big the back is going to be. So I mean, in total, that's about a 31 to 32 inch circumference. But again, I don't know if the back is going to be bigger or smaller. Sometimes the back is smaller. And but when you put this on your body, I mean, unless you have a 30 or 32 inch waist, this isn't going to stretch out. But if you don't, like me, I don't have a 32 inch waist. I wish I did. Anyways, stretched out. I got to do this in a way that it's not going to come off my needles. I'm not pulling this very tight. I'm just lightly stretching it out, like how, it would go around your body. So lightly stretched out, it comes to 21. So that's about 42, give or take, I'm sure. Stretched out lightly. So fully stretched out is probably going to be a bit longer than that. Okay, so I just wanted to give you those 2 measurements as well in case you were curious. So we did the cast on, tick. We did the ribbing, tick. Okay, so next it says to change to the US 8 5mm needles. So I'm going to have to swap out my needle tips. And then you're using stockinette stitch, and you're going to continue in stockinette stitch Oh, it's telling you what stockinette is. Knit on the right side, purl on the wrong side until the piece measures, and then it depends on your size. So, oh, hold on. For me, it says until the piece measures 19 inches. So this is going to be a longer garment. Because I think for me, when I'm knitting a vintage sweater, I think I knit from here, like from the waist to the bottom of my arm, where the armsicle is. I think that's usually about a 16 to 16.5 inches normally for me. But this one said 19. So now if you were doing a 32 bust, is that correct? If you were doing a 32 bust, it would be 16.5. And if you were doing the largest size they have on here, 56-inch bust, you would be doing 22.5 inches. So, and that even says here. So I'm going to read this exactly how it says it, so you, without stopping and explaining stuff. Stockinette stitch. Continue in stockinette stitch, and then in brackets, knit on right side, purl on wrong side, end of brackets. until piece measures whatever your size is, in my case 19 inches, from the cast on edge. Okay, so did I highlight my, yeah I did. So that's what we're going to do next. We are going to, like the next time you see me, I will have knits. I'm just going to fold this up so I'm not looking at it. And I'm going to put my thing on it, my highlighter on it, and my pen. I mean, you're not here, so you don't know if I actually open this up or not, but I'm not going to. So the next time you see me will be once I have knit 19 inches. So it has been a couple of days, and I have knit the 19 inches. While I was knitting this, I was having some thoughts. Also haven't opened this back up yet. So I was going through photos, and I'm going to pop a few up here and there as I'm talking about this a little bit. And this is quite long, in my opinion. And it got me thinking about what maybe the AI considers vintage. Now, I went through the eras. Like in my head, I know that the 1930s and 40s, as an example, sweaters did tend to be shorter. Not always. There are samples of longer sweaters in those 2 decades. However, they did tend to be shorter and when possible short sleeves. And of course, the reasonings for that was the Great Depression in the 30s and then the war in the 40s, World War II. And then in some countries, even after the war was over, there was still rationing until the 50s. So I started thinking more about lengths of sweaters through the decades. So in the 1900s anyways. So 1910s, 1920s, definitely longer. Women's sweaters in Victorian, Edwardian, and then the flapper eras of the 20s. They were longer and sometimes belted, sometimes not. And in the Victorian times, they would be shaped to fit around a corset, like the shape. Same with the Edwardian, where there was less of that small waist, but sweaters tended to be shaped, have a shaping around the waist, in order to work around, the big bulky skirts, the corsetting, all that. And then the 20s, the shape is very boxy and longer. But then we start getting into the 30s and the 40s, and there is, the sweaters are shorter, there's waist shaping, the sleeves are changing, shorter in a lot of cases, but not always. And then starting the 50s, we start to see sweaters being more fitted, not always again, but more fitted. They are starting to get longer again. And when I say longer, I mean, they end at some point in your hips, whether it's the top of your hip, middle, or the bottom of your hips. Then we start going into the 60s, and the beginning of the 60s, you still see some of that 1950s shaping, but towards the end of the 60s, longer, looser, and then 70s, same, longer, looser. But then I thought, is the AI thinking vintage is from 1910 to 1970, or is the AI including, and I know a lot of people hate hearing this, but the 80s and the 90s, because technically that's considered vintage. Especially when you go to a lot of vintage shops now, you're not finding anything before the mid 70s at this point, and you're seeing a lot of 80s and 90s stuff. I know I have a hard time dealing with it. For me, vintage is still like pre-1980, right? Anyway, so that has me thinking, does it consider vintage eras where the sweaters are not shorter? I don't know. It was just thoughts that were going around in my head. Anyway, I'm going to read out the next set of instructions. If you are knitting along. So what did we just do? Yeah, so I just want to repeat that for this step, because I chose size 42 bust, it asked me to knit 19 inches. Now, if you chose smaller, it's going to be shorter. If you chose bigger bust size, it'll be longer. Okay, so now it's saying armholes. Bind off, and then in brackets, choose your size, stitches at the beginning of the next 2 rows. So I am, again, I chose 42, so, oh geez. Okay, all right. Okay, this is odd. I don't know how this is going to work out for people at bigger sizes, but armholes, bind off, in my case, 10 stitches at the beginning of the next 2 rows. Now, if you chose a size 56, you're going to be binding off 17 stitches. So I was like momentarily thinking, is that 10 stitches total, meaning 5 and 5? But that wouldn't make sense, because if you chose size 32, you'd be doing 5, which would be 2.5, 2.5, which doesn't make sense because it doesn't give enough depth for the oh god. Okay, well, I am going to do that, and then I will be right back. Okay, I've done the decreases at both ends. I mean, it doesn't look, it kind of naturally curves a little bit, to be honest. I don't know if you can see that. Anyway, has a bit of a natural curve, but yeah, it actually it really does. It has a natural curve. Actually, it doesn't just go straight across, like dead straight across. There's a bit of a curve. So, we'll see. All right. So, what is the next instruction? Get my handy highlighter out. Okay, just check that off so we know that we did it. Armholes, done. Neckline. Should there be... oh, this is gonna be... I'm just rereading the armholes because there should be some real estate between the binding off of the armhole and the beginning of the neckline. Oh, unless it's going to be a V-neck. I mean, that would make sense, right? If it's going to be a V-neck. Because I didn't specify what kind of neck. Okay, so neck... oh, so I got to mark off what mine is. So... or it could be a deep... curved neckline, right? Maybe. Okay. 5. Okay. See, here it does... it doesn't just do 6, 7, 8, 9. Here for neckline for 32 and 34, it says 3. Work 3 stitches at the beginning of the next... This does not make any sense at all. I don't understand what this means. Neckline, work, whatever I highlighted, work 4 stitches at the beginning of the next... Oh, I think we're going to have to do 2 sets of instructions at the same time. Or not. Sorry, I've had to read 2 sets of lines of instructions because I'm trying to work out what's going on here. Work 4 stitches at the beginning of the next 12 rows for neck shaping. So I'm going to read the next line of instructions because I'm very confused right now. Shoulders. Bind off remaining stitches for each shoulder when piece measures 25.5 inches from cast on edge. Work 4 stitches at the beginning of the next 12 rows for neck shaping. Give me a minute, I gotta work this out. So what I've concluded is it's missing steps. So normally in a knitting pattern that is not a cardigan, what it does is it has you go to the middle and work one side and then work the other side. And so I've marked the middle of, I don't know if you can see that, middle of my garment. Because if I try to continue on exactly as the pattern says, it's not going to work. So I'm going to have to, add in a step in order to get this to continue to work. So I will note this also on the pattern in brackets somewhere for the PDF I'm going to put up, because if I go if I follow the instructions, it says work 4 stitches at the beginning of the next 12 rows for neck shaping. What it means, or in any other pattern, it would say, normally it would say knit 40 stitches in my case, then decrease 4 stitches at the beginning of the next 12 rows for neck shaping. Now, as knitting, you can't go back and forth if you're doing that, because you're going to have like a divide, right? So I divided everything in half. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to knit over to my stitch marker, and then I'm going to work one side, and then I'm going to, when I'm done that, then I'll do the other side, including knitting until it's 25.5 inches total. So I then also took the 12 rows, at the beginning of 12 rows. So 12 in the end equals 12. 12 divided in half is 6, but that's the beginning of the rows, right? So what your total knitted rows is going to be 12, because you're going to be doing knit row, purl row, knit row, purl row, and the same on the other side. But the total of decreases you're doing is 6 times 4 stitches. I know that's probably sounding confusing, but again, I'm going to write all of this in the PDF I'm creating for you, and I'll put it in like special brackets, or I'll highlight it or something like that, so that you know this is the math that I got to. Oh my god. I know a vintage pattern. Well, see, it's making this a true vintage pattern, because there's a lot of deciphering in some vintage patterns. I know I've had to decipher things, or there's a line of instruction missing, or the numbers don't add up. Okay, so anyways, yes, I've had to readjust some of the information here in order to be able to do this, because otherwise I can't continue on otherwise. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. So I'm gonna work the neckline decreases and what do you call it? And then work one side up to the shoulder bind off, and I'll do the bind off on both sides. Oh my goodness. Okay. Yeah. So I'm gonna work on that now. So normally in patterns, not always, I have seen it done this way. You would graduate the decreases from the outside of the shoulder into the neckline. So for instance, this is 16 stitches, so normally you would graduate it by either, well, 16 more than likely you do 2 steps. You do decrease 8, decrease 8. If it was 24 stitches, you maybe do 3 decreases of 6, that kind of thing, right? But it says to cast on, yeah, it says, so for shoulder, it says bind off remaining stitches for each shoulder when piece measures, whatever your measurement is, minus 25.5 inches from cast on edge. So when they say cast on edge, they mean down here. Well, I mean, this is a bottom up, so it would be the bottom in this case. Okay, so other than having to change the neckline, I'm very happy with this. It looks like a sweater. Sweater front. So the AI has made an error with the neckline. Okay, so let me read the back instructions with you, and I'm not going to go line by line as I did with the front, because as I just mentioned, it's probably going to be very similar. So, body back. Yeah, so cast on same as front, cast on same as back. My strap keeps falling down. I think my dress is just pushed up more on one side than the other, the way I'm sitting here. I just gotta count over to mine. 5. Continue as for front until, interesting, piece measures 19.5 inches. Because the front was 19 inches, so there's a half an inch difference. Armholes and neckline, follow instructions as for front, but do not shape neck. So it's straight across. And then bind off shoulders when piece measures 26 inches instead of, was it 25.5 inches? Yeah, so there's a half an inch difference between the front and the back. It says bind off shoulders when piece measures whatever from cast on edge. Now, you're literally knitting straight across, or you're not doing neck shaping in the back, so you're just binding it off in like straight across. Okay, so other than not doing the neckline, it's basically exactly the same instructions. So I'm going to go ahead and start the back. Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna do the back off camera, and then when I'm done that, I'll come back and we'll do the sleeves. Well, it's been a few days, and I've gotten quite a bit done on this sweater, and I should confess it's almost done. So, I think where we left off was I was knitting the sleeves. I knit 2 at a time. Initially what my plan was is I was going to come back and talk to you about the sleeve caps. But after I knit the sleeves to the length that it called for, I was naughty and I looked at the sleeve cap instructions and realized they're pretty minimal. So I went ahead and did them. So I have two finished sleeves. So the length of the sleeve until I get to the sleeve cap was 21 inches for me. And it comes right to my wrist. Not sewn in yet though. So when you sew garments together, sometimes it changes the lengths of things. I've noticed that before with sleeves where I've knit it, it fits me right to my wrist, and then I sew it in. It's more than just sewing it in. It's when you do the ribbing on the neckline, it pulls it in a bit, and then which pulls up the shoulder seam, which then pulls the sleeve up. Anyway, so I am hoping it's still going to fit, and the reason I'm saying this is not only did I knit both the sleeves and do the sleeve cap, which I'm going to come back to the sleeve cap in a moment, I wanted to see what the fit of this garment was going to be. And I also knit the neckband, come back to that in a second. It's pretty shapeless, I'll give you that. Garments have less shape. Knit garments are more boxy and long and stuff, in the 20s, and then the 60s, that's more of a straight line kind of thing. So also because it is kind of straight up and down with no shaping, it is a little baggy on me around the middle, like the waist, but which is fine. It doesn't look horrible. It doesn't look like it is too big. For me, I like a little bit of waist shaping, and there's none. None. So I did a try on, and it fits me, other than just being slightly too big in the waist for me personally. And the armholes right now are okay, but that could change when I sew in the sleeves. Anyways, the reason I'm showing you this body is the sleeve seam on this sweater. So let's just put it this way. This is where this dress ends is where a sweater seam usually is on me. I have narrow shoulders here. This is coming down about here on me. I don't know if you can see that. So that is about 2 inches past where I would usually have a shoulder seam in a knit garment. Which then throws me back to, is this a 1950s style sweater? Because there are long sweaters from the 50s that are drop shoulder. But I would think if it was drop shoulder, it'd be further down. Or it could just be because I'm narrow here. Maybe this is the right width, I'm just narrow. But again, once I put the inset the sleeves and sew them up, it might be fine, who knows. So the sleeve cap. It is pretty flat. Most sleeve caps that I've knit graduate to do a bit of a curve and to fit within the armsicle. This one has 2 decreases only. The first set of decreases is, and when I say set of decreases, I mean on both ends. So the first set of decreases was bind off, now in my size, 7 stitches at the beginning of the next 2 rows, which I did. Then bind off 6 stitches at the beginning of the next 2 rows. Then bind off remaining stitches. Now, when you fold this in half, right, I mean, this could fit up to the top of the, like, it might fit the armsicle, but is it going to make it wonky? Like, is it going to pull it up weird? Is it going to pull, like, I don't know what's going to happen. So I did seam up one of the sleeves because I was, worried about how far along the wrist it was going to be. It is a bit loose here too, which is fine. In the winter, that means I can just layer stuff under it. But where's my armhole here? So this is at my armhole. This is at my armhole here. And this is where the sleeve cap is ending, which is like about an inch shorter than where this fell on my arm, which makes me think that it's either going to pull the sleeve up this way or it's going to pull the garment down that way. But again, I won't know until I actually inset the sleeves. So, and the neckline. And I also did the neckline. I know I said I was going to come and do step by step, but I also don't want this video to be like a million years long, and realize that maybe if I do little chunks of stuff at a time, anyone doing like just, who's decided to knit this along with me, it might make it easier. So the neckline is part of the finishing steps. So the finishing steps. Sew shoulder seams, done. Attach sleeves to armholes. Okay, so I'm doing this out of order because I was trying to figure out if this garment was going to fit me. So let me start this over again. You're going to sew the shoulder seams. Then you're going to attach the sleeve to the armhole. You're going to sew up the side seams. Then you're going to pick up the stitches around the neckline and do a knit 2, purl 2 ribbing for 1 inch. And then you're going to block sweater to measurements. Now, in my case, I'm not blocking because I used acrylic yarn. If you're using wool, please block. I've also not sewn in the ends. There's a whole bunch of ends here. So what happened was, you would have seen in previous, the neckline, after I did all the decreases, looked very wide. For the ribbing of the neckline, because I felt like if I did pick up every stitch, the neckline would have been loose. So what I did instead was, for every 3 stitches, I only picked up 2 stitches. So you would, count 3 stitches and knit 2 of those stitches. So you're basically going knit 2, skip a stitch, or you're going knit 1, skip a stitch, knit 1. It's up to you how you do it. But for me, it's for every 3 stitches, I only knit 2 of them. And for the bind off, I did not do it in rib. I just did a straight bind off. Every time I try to talk on camera, I lose my voice. Anyway, I apologize. And it did pull the neckline in, and it looks very nice now. It's kind of hard to see on camera because it's all the same. The yarn's all the same color, but yeah, it pulled the neckline in nice. It is still a nice wide neckline. It's got a bit of a scoop, and I like it. And yeah, I think that was all the updates I needed to do up until this part. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to insert the sleeves to see how it is. We have a sweater. Can you, to answer the question, can you make a knitting pattern using a artificial intelligence program? Yes, you absolutely can. However, you do need to give it instructions or parameters. Minimally, you have to give it parameters, right? Because if you don't, it is not going to fully understand what it is you want. Now, AI will learn. So for instance, if I continually create knitting patterns, it's going to eventually start to learn, oh, okay, well, it'll get a little more intuitive, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word or not, but it'll be like, okay, well, a knitting pattern needs this. It needs a neckline. It needs neck decreases. It needs a cap. It will learn over time. And the more that you use AI to create a thing, right, it'll just keep learning. Am I going to use this again in the future? Hell yeah. I am, because I am in the process of, creating knitting patterns to sell. I've already created a couple of berets, and I'm now working on actual garments, right? For me, the biggest thing and the biggest reason I'm going to use an AI to help me create knitting patterns is I want to make sure that I make all of my patterns size inclusive. And I have noticed, though, you know what, I'm still going to have to do tweaks. When I gave it the bust range, it put information for the bust range. Some of it was wrong. Or not necessarily wrong, but it was like, it wasn't like stepped, or it wasn't, it was just like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, as opposed to bust 32 to 36 is 4 stitches, bust 38 to is 5 stitches. It didn't graduate it, right? But I need to teach it that. And in order for me to create a thing that many different sizes, bust sizes, can use, this is really going to be a huge tool for me to help me figure that out. Will I write a 100% complete pattern with it? No. Because there are things it's not maybe going to finesse, right? Like certain shapings. And that I'm going to have to still do manually. But this gives me a basis to work from. I'm really happy with this. I am really, really happy. Oh, and the other thing, sorry, coming back to the pattern, for the yarn weight, or for the yarn, it said approximately 1,000 to 1,600 yards. I can't remember how much I used. So what I'm going to do is, so I used half, I had a huge ball of yarn, so I used half of that yarn. And then I started a whole other new one. This equals my initial first half. So I'm going to say that whatever it was I used for my yarn, whatever the yardage of that big ball is going to be what I used for my size. So I will note that, just so that everybody knows. Okay, so yes, you can create a knitting pattern with artificial intelligence. Now, in my case, I did use ChatGPT. So just keep that in mind if you want something a little more simplistic. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this knitting challenge. I had a lot of fun doing it. This also knit up very fast, believe it or not, considering the length. Also, worsted yarn. And I had a lot of fun doing this. A lot. Even with all the little weird mishaps along the way. So, will you knit this sweater? Because I am going to have the notes in here of what the things I had to change, right? So let me know if you're going to try the sweater out, or if you followed along with me. Anyway, that is it for now. I have to get the sweater off because I am starting to melt. It's still too warm here for sweaters. And yeah, so at the end of this, you're going to see a little video of me wearing this. Until next time, stay kitschy.